from the Acts of the Apostles, chapter 3. One day, Peter and John were going up to the temple at the hour of prayer, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And a man lame from birth was being carried in. People would lay him daily at the gate of the temple, called the Beautiful Gate, so that he could ask for alms from those entering the temple. When he saw Peter and John about to go into the temple, he asked them for alms. Peter looked intently at him, as did John, and said, "Look at us." And he fixed his attention on them, expecting to receive something from them. But Peter said, "I have no silver or gold, but what I have, I give you. In the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, stand up and walk." And he took him by the right hand and raised him up, and immediately his feet and his ankles were made strong. Jumping up, he stood and began to walk. And he entered the temple with them, walking and leaping and praising God. All of the people saw him walking and praising God, and they recognized him as the one who used to sit and ask for alms at the Beautiful Gate of the temple. And they were filled with wonder and amazement at what had happened to him. Thus ends the reading of the word. The difference between Luke, Acts, chapter 3, verses 1 through 10, and John, that story in John, the Gospel of John, chapter 21, verses, whatever those verses, 12 through 19, is one page in the Bible. But there's many, many years difference in the writing. As a matter of fact, the Bible, you know, is not a book that's written in chronological order, right? Right, we know that. So you need to know that Acts was written before that appendix, that addition, that addendum to the Gospel of John. This story, that wonderful story in chapter 21 is considered by most scholars to be an appendix, an addendum, not written by the original author, because the words are different. The words of the story are different. The story in Acts was written before this story in John. But I don't want to get all chronological on you, okay? I have a point to using both of these stories. That first story that Laura read, that first story out of the Gospel of John, is that wonderful story about breakfast on the beach. When John and Peter, and he's got Thomas and Nathaniel with him, neither of them are probably fishermen, and James and John, well, there are 7 of them who've gone back to fishing. And they've gone back to fishing, well, because it's familiar. It feels right. It's what they know. And when Jesus was crucified, even when they saw him post the resurrection, they still didn't seem to have an idea of what it was they were going to do with themselves. So, go and do what's familiar. Go and do what puts food on the table. They went back to fishing. And in this story, they're up at 3 o'clock in the morning trying to catch fish, you know, and they don't catch anything. I guess it's not like, you know, getting back on a bicycle after you fall off. If you've been away from fishing for 3 years, you got to get it down again. So anyway, they haven't caught any fish, and John looks out from where they are on the beach and sees this guy waving at him. And John points out to Peter, so there's a guy waving at us on the beach. Hey, children, have you caught any fish? Who is that? Listen, why don't you take your nets, put them on the other side of the boat, see what you get. Full, nets full, overflowing with fish. And John says to Peter, of the boat, and he swims to shore, and they all have breakfast together on the beach. But there is this important, very, very important moment that Peter and Jesus have together. This most important exchange between these two, where the risen Christ says to Peter, Peter, do you love these more than me? Do you love your fish and your fishing more than me? And Peter says, Jesus, you know that I love you. And Jesus says to him, then what I want you to do, Peter, is I want you to go out and I want you to feed my lambs. Now, Peter, do you love me? Well, yes, I love you. Well then, shepherd my sheep. Peter, do you love me? Jesus, I've said it twice. You know that I love you. Then feed my sheep. Feed my lambs, shepherd my sheep, feed my sheep. Peter, get about the business that I called you to get about. The key word here, what was the first word that Jesus said to Peter, to Simon Peter, to Andrew? What was the first word? Follow. Follow. It's a verb. The word follow has within it more than just walking behind and follow the leader, and in some cultures, 10 steps behind. That was funny. Wake up. I'm awake. I was up late last night. Follow doesn't mean to follow behind or follow in the footsteps so much as it means to follow up, follow through, carry on, succeed. This is what Jesus means when he talks about the discipleship of his followers. He's carried these people with him for 3 years, trying to train them up, trying to turn them into those who would carry on, follow up and follow through. He gives Peter the opportunity today to wake up and make a decision about how it is he is going to follow through with the verb to follow. Well, we have this interesting story in the book of Acts where John and Simon Peter are back in the city of Jerusalem, probably during a festival, whether it was the Feast of the Tabernacles or maybe it was Pentecost, whatever. They are back in Jerusalem. And they are going up to the temple at the time of prayer, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Interesting time. And at 3 o'clock, this is also a time when people have brought a lame man to sit outside the beautiful gate of the temple to collect alms. And you all know what alms are. Alms. Alms for the poor. You guys know what alms are? No. See, these guys don't know what alms are. It's money. Alms. It's charitable money given to the poor. And they would sit at the side of the road. If you see movies, you'll see it in movies. Alms for the poor, they would call out. And people would donate and give money to the person who was begging at the side of the beautiful gate. The best time to do the begging was at festival time, when there were lots of people in town who were coming up to the temple to do prayers and to do sacrifices and offerings. That's the good time of day to be there. This lame man has been lame from birth. Now, I don't know if you all remember, but I talked one Sunday about when I preached about Bartimaeus. Remember Bartimaeus, blind Bartimaeus? When I preached about Bartimaeus, and I talked about the lame and the blind being excluded from what? The temple. The lame and the blind were not allowed in the temple. If you were lame and you couldn't walk into the temple, then you couldn't go in. This lame beggar has never been inside the temple. Can you please imagine that for a moment? You are broken